Chapter 13. Motion and Time. Measurement of time in ancient times. Long, long ago, people did not have clocks or watches for measuring time. But people had realized the importance of time. Our ancestors used some natural events which repeated regularly after definite intervals of time to measure time. For example, the time taken between one sunrise to the next sunrise was called a day. The time taken between one new moon to the next new moon was called a month. The time taken by the earth to complete one revolution of the sun was called a year. Some of the important time measuring devices used in ancient times were sundial, sand clock and water clock. Measurement of time. Clocks and watches are the most common time measuring devices used by us. The working of clocks and watches are rather complex, but all of them use the principle of periodic motion for measuring time. A motion which repeats itself at regular intervals of time is called periodic motion. Simple pendulum. A simple pendulum consists of a small metal ball called bob, suspended by a long thread from a rigid support such that the bob is free to swing back and forth. Length of the pendulum. The length of the string thread from the point of suspension to the center of the bob is called the length of the pendulum. Mean position of the bob. The position of the bob when it is at rest is called its mean position. Extreme positions of the bob. The positions where the bob is at the maximum distance from the mean position are called the extreme positions. Oscillation of the pendulum. The motion of the bob of a pendulum from one extreme position to the other extreme position and back is called an oscillation of the pendulum. Amplitude of pendulum. The maximum displacement of the bob from its mean position on either side is called the amplitude of pendulum. Time period of the pendulum. The time taken by the bob of a pendulum to complete one oscillation is called the time period of the pendulum. Activity 1. To determine the time period of a pendulum. Things needed: a metal ball bob, a string of length 1 meter, an iron stand, a stopwatch. Method. Set up a simple pendulum as shown in figure with a string or thread of length nearby 1 meter, carrying the bob at lower end and tied at its upper end from a rigid support like iron stand. Switch off the nearby fans. Let the bob of the pendulum come to rest at its mean position. Mark the position of the bob on the floor below it. To set the pendulum in motion, hold the bob gently and move it slightly to one side. Now, release the bob from its displaced position gently. Do not push the bob while releasing it. Ensure the bob does not spin on its axis while oscillating. Start the stopwatch when the bob is at one of the extreme positions. Keep on counting the number of oscillations made by the pendulum bob. Measure the time which pendulum bob takes to make 20 complete oscillations. Calculations. Time taken for 20 oscillations equals 48 seconds. Therefore, time taken for one oscillation equals 48 upon 20, which equals 2.4 seconds. Therefore, time period of this pendulum is 2.4 seconds.